Welcome everyone to the Solana Validator Educational Workshop. Today we've got Lucas from Jito leading a workshop on the Jito-Solana concepts and setup. So this will be for people who may know some validator concepts already, but are interested in running a Jito client instead of the Solana Labs client. So with that, I'll kick it off to Lucas from Jito to take it away. Let me stop my share.
Cool. See here. Wait, you see this?
Yep, we see it.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about Jito-Solana and what we're working on at Jito. Thanks for shout out as well today and the decentralization report for the Solana network. That was pretty cool. A surprise. So yeah, Jito builds high performance MEV infrastructure for Solana. Kind of walk over like what is Jito-Solana. I think some of you here are probably running it. Maybe others have heard of it. So yeah, excited to dive in. I think it'll be a little bit high level, and then we can kind of dive into the weeds and like, you know, what is this client actually doing and what are the different pieces involved. So yeah, with that, one of the co-founders and CEO at Jito. My name is Lucas. I'll probably see me on Discord as Buffalu. And yeah, like our team currently have 11 people on our team, backgrounds in MEV, distributed systems, various VC funding from like Multicoin, Delphi, Solana Ventures, Framework Ventures. And yeah, today, I think there's around 175 validators on the Solana network running the Jito-Solana client, and I think it's right around 32% of stake as well. Yeah, I'll kind of go through like high level summary, some of the benefits from running the client, we'll dive like somewhat deep into the technical weeds and then go through the onboarding process. It's super easy. Anyone can run it. Takes like less than 5 or 10 minutes to switch over. So yeah, Jito's built a suite of like MEV products to capture MEV. For those that aren't super familiar with MEV stands for maximum extractable value. Some people call it minor extractable value. It's all kind of this similar concept where as a validator, you are producing blocks and you are the final arbiter of how those transactions are ordered in a block. And by running special software, you can actually make more money with your block space. So, you know, we built a lot of tools and infrastructure to do this. The main piece is Jito-Solana. It's a fork of the Solana Labs client, and it manages some communications with the relay and block engine, and then also has some special code in it to process bundles. Bundles are basically like you can think of it like a unit of work for like a high frequency trader. Essentially, it's a list of transactions that execute sequentially and atomically. And I'll kind of dive into like why would someone use a bundle in a bit. And yeah, so today, currently around $120,000 earned for stakers and validators in the last few months. So yeah, this is super high level, like what is Jito-Solana? How does the system work? Essentially, what happens is there's the Jito-Solana validator, which is kind of the main piece here. And when you start up the Jito-Solana validator, you tell it a relayer to connect to. So you provide a URL. And when the validator boots up, it will connect to the relayer. That relayer and the validator start to heartbeat with each other. And essentially after, I think it's a minute of heartbeating, the validator will tell the network to send the non-vote transactions to the relayer. Or, you know, the relayer isn't touching voting and consensus messages. It's only touching the non-vote transactions. So what happens is the transactions go to the relayer. the relayer, it has a very similar code, essentially the same code that the validator has in the TPU, or the transaction processing unit. So it will it has a quick server running in there. It has signature verification. It will deduplicate packets and transactions. And essentially what will happen is it will forward packets that searchers are interested in to the block engine, which is a piece of code that we run. And we'll share that with searchers. Searchers can kind of send their trades back to the block engine. We run some fancy simulation logic in there to simulate, determine which are the most profitable trades, and then we send those profitable trades to the current leader, the Jito-Solana leader. And yeah, this is a super like high level overview of how the block engine works. I'll dive way more into like the specifics there, how we do that, and kind of get into the nitty gritty. But essentially we kind of leverage some of the read write account locks and things like that to kind of take all these bundles that we get and kind of like segregate them based on the state that they touch. And then we run a bunch of simulation to figure out which bundles are going to succeed and which ones will fail. And, you know, from the ones that succeed, which ones are going to pay the most. And it will forward those bundles to your validator. There's also this, the MEV payment kind of happens outside of the normal priority fee inclusion. And so essentially what happens is every validator has a, can think of it like a little like MEV piggy bank. So every validator creates this like MEV piggy bank every epoch, and all of the tips accumulate in there. So, you know, like we run a validator Jito-1. Jito-1 has a MEV piggy bank. Zentetsu's Shinobi system has a different MEV piggy bank. Every validator has their own little piggy bank that the tips accumulate into every epoch. And essentially what happens is at the end of the epoch, we run a off-chain process that will essentially take a snapshot of every validator and their staker's information. And it keeps that snapshot, the staker information, and then we essentially generate a Merkle tree, upload the Merkle root on chain, and then claim MEV for every staker. So this happens after every epoch. All of the MEV is distributed to the validators and stakers automatically. We run a lot of this process right now. This process is permissionless. When you start up your validator, you can tell your validator like who is the person that can upload this data. So in theory, anyone can do this. And yeah, there's a lot of validators using Jito-Solana. I'll share the slide with you after, Tim. But we have a retool. I think there's around 175 validators, currently roughly 32% of network stake. Cool. So I'll go through some of the benefits. So yeah, MEV, it's a new revenue stream for validators compared to just running the normal Solana Labs client. I guess you could somewhat say that priority fees are a version of like MEV fees. This is slightly different. So yeah, it's, you know, you don't really have to set up any extra hardware if you don't want to. Running the validators free, permissionless. There's no incremental cost. MEV tips are pretty low right now. I think, you know, there's not a ton of on-chain activity to what was going on in like 2021. You know, we're obviously extremely bullish Solana. Hopefully if you are here as well, you are, and believe that DeFi is going to do very well in Solana. So we hope to see the DeFi volumes increasing. That will create more arbitrage and MEV opportunities, and will hopefully result in more fees for validators as well. So mentioned earlier, there's been around $120,000 paid out to stakers and their validators over the last few months. And there is a adjustable MEV commission rate that you can set for your validator. It's another command line argument. And so you can choose anywhere from 0 to 100%, and that's in bits. So you can get pretty granular with the commission that you set. And And that's completely separate from the vote commission as well. So you can kind of play with those two variables however you want, independent of each other. We've seen some validators get increase in stake as well from running the client as well. There's a pretty cool to see like validators.app and StakeWiz and some other websites showing Jito enabled validators. If you run a explorer for validators and want to show which validators are running the Jito software, you can pull that data from on-chain, or we have an API that you can use as well to calculate that. And yeah, I think one of the big reasons why we started this is because we had this theory that there would be a lot of spam on Solana. Just if you look at what happened on BSC and Polygon early on, and you kind of seeing it on Base with there's an app on Base if you were following called FriendTech, and there was a lot of spam of people trying to buy shares early. Essentially, if there's money to be made, people will find the best ways to make it. Sometimes the best way to make money is by spamming the chain. And we kind of had this theory that would happen on Solana. If you look at the data on chain, it's definitely true. The failure rates for arbitrage have been pretty high, right around 96 to 99%. And now it's a little closer to 95% as well. Essentially, we replace that transaction spam with like a deterministic ordering mechanism. So if you're trying to capture MEV, instead of like spamming to land behind something, you can tell the system, hey, I want these transactions XYZ to execute first, second, third, and here's how much I'm willing to pay for it. And then we kind of handle the rest for you. Cool. So yeah, I'll dive into the technical details here. Yeah, I'll answer this question. Process that works out what transactions the Jito validators will execute is run by you guys, right? So the transaction flow is essentially, it goes from the relayer. There's a small delay, and essentially what happens is the relayer will send the packet off, the transactions off to our block engine. And that small delay is essentially gives searchers enough time to simulate and predict what's going to happen and like what the correct bundle is to extract the money or the MEV, and gives our system enough time. And then if there, I guess to answer your question, we determine what the bundles are executed are, and then every other vote or every other transaction that's not in the bundle, it just passes from the relayer straight through to the validator. So let me go back a few slides because I think this will help. So essentially, the transactions hit the relayer, there's a small delay, and then the relayer will automatically forward it to the validator. So it's not, the relayer isn't forwarding every packet to the block engine, and the block engine is forwarding it to the validator. Essentially, the relayer is like, you can think of it as like the transaction like custodian, in the sense that it is the one determining what to forward. Now the bundles, that is something that we determine. And yeah, to answer Zantetsu's question, votes just go straight to the Jito-Solana validator. So the relayer does not have a TPU vote or TPU vote forward port on it. You want to ask your questions, Zantetsu?
Yeah, I just want to point out that if Jito runs a validator, you have to trust that what he's saying is true, which of course we all know, upstanding team, there's no reason not to trust them. But to be clear, if they're running a relayer, you don't know what transactions would have gone through. If you run a relayer, you can know. So that's why I think it's best for everyone to run their own relayer if they can. That way you control the code and can inspect the code and can build the code and can be sure that it's not going to filter out which transactions it's going to let you see and which ones these are. So depending on how much you trust the Jito team is how much you trust that the answer is accurate and that the relayer really does just forward all transactions through. Just want to make that very.
That's a good call out. So yeah, we run a lot of relayers as kind of a service for the network. but I know Zantetsu runs his own. There's a few, maybe like 1 or 2 other validators that run their own. You can run it on the same server as your validator. If I remember correctly, that's what Zantetsu does, but correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, it's a pretty lightweight process. It's running quick server and sig verify and all that stuff. I wish I was 18 years old. But yeah, let's dive into the technical details. You know, I think as a validator, you have to be pretty technical. I think for a lot of people, this is potentially a black box, so we can kind of dive more into this. So yeah, like what is Jito-Solana? The main thing in Jito-Solana is this thing called bundle stage. And bundle stage, it's a variation of banking stage. What is banking stage? Banking stage is like the main transaction processing piece of code in the Solana Labs validator. So banking stage will it will receive signature verified transactions. It will prioritize them based on the priority fees that are assigned. There's I think banking stage, it's like 4 or 6 threads. I can't remember off the top of my head, but you know, there's these like queues of packets, and banking stage will essentially try to go through them as fast as possible to execute them. So bundle stage is a variation of that. It knows how to execute bundles. A bundle is essentially just a list of transactions. They execute all or nothing today. There's sequential and atomic. So if you have 3 transactions, and the middle one fails, it will just stop executing the rest of it and kind of revert that state. So the state from the first transaction never gets committed. And this is to ensure that there's, you know, we're not wasting block space and all that. And then it's atomic, or it's sequential as well. So, you know, it won't execute things out of order. It's atomic in the sense that the entire thing is committed, all or nothing. And then it will not go over, it will not cross slot boundaries as well. So you can basically guarantee that this bundle, like these set of transactions can be executed within the same slot. So my dog out. And yeah, most searchers, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but most searchers on Solana are doing arbitrage. And there's no mempool on Solana like pre-Jito. So essentially what happens is like I send a trade, I make a trade on like Orca or some other, like, and it could be any AMM. And let's say my trade goes through, and then it leaves a price imbalance between the exchange I traded on and everything else on Solana. Now there's an arbitrage opportunity. And what happens is, you know, someone sitting right next to that server, maybe they see that state first, they fire off 1 or 2 transactions. Someone else a little farther away or with slower code fires off 1 or 2 transactions. You kind of have all these searchers that just like fire off based on what they see at that time. And that's how we end up with a lot of the arbitrage spam on Solana. So what happens with our system and the block engine and the relayer and all this stuff is we'll send those transactions to searchers, and they essentially have a few hundred milliseconds to figure out how they want to order these transactions. So in the case of Jito, what happens is I would send that trade, a searcher would see it, they could simulate it and be like, oh, this is going to create an arbitrage. And now what happens is they can submit a bundle where it's my trade first and then their arbitrage transaction second, and that would be a bundle. So that's a single like unit of execution, and then that validator would essentially process my trade and then the arbitrage trade immediately after. And now it's very efficient. It's capturing the MEV essentially like 1 tick apart in the proof of history hash. So it's capturing it as fast as possible. That's kind of like one use case for bundles where you have multiple transactions from different signers. Another interesting use case for bundles is there's a 1232 byte max limit in the quick packets now. And so we've gotten some interest from people wanting to, improve the user experience for like dApps and things like that, so they can send bundles and have them execute atomically. There's a lot of like filtering stuff that happens in bundle stage as well. The block space will be like pre-allocated for a bundle, so we can ensure that it will have enough compute ahead of time, so that we like don't get to the last transaction and it's like, oh, I ran out of block space. I need to like roll this state back. And then there's also some like tip account stuff that I mentioned earlier. Essentially, the bundle stage will kind of manage that for you as well. And there's a bunch of other stuff in there. Code's open source, so you can read through it and let us know if you have any questions. Two other things in there: relayer stage and block engine stage. Essentially, they're just right now we send the bundles and packets over a gRPC connection. So that's kind of just like managing connections to the relayers and block engines. There's a lot of heartbeats and fallback modes. So for instance, if the relayer goes down and the validator misses a heartbeat, after 1.5 seconds, it will actually disconnect from the relayer and tell the network to start sending it transactions instead of the relayer. And then it will try to like reestablish connection and kind of do that handshake and all that. Some other like miscellaneous changes. We added like bulk proof of history writing. Essentially, this guarantees that if there's a bundle that contains conflicting transactions, we kind of have to like execute stuff and cache the state, and we don't want to end up in a situation where we like write some transactions in the bundle to proof of history and then we realize we're at the end of the slot. So added this, like, it's kind of like a bulk write to proof of history, so you can write a bunch of things one hash apart. There's some like bundle account locking management, and yeah, I mean, a lot of this is going on behind the scenes. There's I think there's around 5 or 6 command line arguments that you can add to the Jito-Solana validator to get it running. And then I guess one other thing that's important to mention is there's no like Jito-Solana doesn't touch replay. It doesn't touch consensus, and there's no like voting changes. For Zantetsu's question earlier, like the relayer doesn't touch votes. Votes still go straight to the validator. So yeah. And then someone asks if a bundle all or nothing, or can people submit partial bundles which then get built into a bigger non-conflicting set? So right now, the way it's currently implemented is that the entire bundle must be all or nothing, but that certainly like a limited use case compared to if you're okay with some transactions failing. So that is something we're certainly exploring. Maybe you could add like a bit, or maybe there's like some bits you can add to every transaction in the bundle where it's like, oh, this is okay if it fails and whatnot. Cool. All right, so I'll dive into the relayer real quick. Keep the questions coming, by the way. So yeah, the relayers, it's essentially a TPU equivalent as like a separate service. So it's all written in Rust. It's using a lot of the Solana Labs libraries. So it's using the quick server, the same quick server, the same signature verification stage and all of that. It does not touch any of the votes. So votes will continue to go straight to your validator. So like in the like very extreme case where like something incredibly bad happens and like the relayers just like totally screw up, it will not touch the votes. And hopefully the like other layers of redundancy we have will fix the problem, but they won't touch votes. As I mentioned, you can run on the same or separate server. It's very low compute compared to the rest of the validator that's like executing transactions. It's basically just managing quick connections, running signature verification, and then it also does like the packet deduplication. As I mentioned earlier, it will forward packets to the block engine for searchers. but it also is kind of the custodian for that packet. So after what's currently a 200 millisecond delay, it will forward those packets to the validator. So I think this is pretty important as well, and goes back to what Zantetsu mentioned, like you should run your own relayer if you can. And like the block engine cannot censor packets that are going to it. The relayer is kind of the owner of that packet. So if you don't trust us, or you want to run your own relayer, you want to customize it or something, you can run your own. And yeah, it's also kind of like this, the relayer is also kind of this router too. So it will forward packets to the current and next end leaders. It relies on the, when you start the relayer up, you can pass RPC servers and WebSocket servers, and it uses that to keep track of time, where time is essentially like what is the current slot, and it will route it to the right destination. It will can support multiple RPC servers. So I think right now in our relayers, we use around 10 RPC servers. So we're essentially kind of like load balancing and like receiving time updates from all these different RPC servers. So if we need to update an RPC server or something, we don't bring down the relayers. And then something else I was going to mention there. Oh yeah, and then there's some health checks involved too. So you know, it's acting as a router for keeping track of time and routing packets. There are health checks. So if it detects that all of the RPCs are unhealthy, then the relayer will go into this like unhealthy state where it will disconnect every validator from it. Validator will see that got disconnected, tell the network to send transactions back to itself. Cool. So I'll dive into the block engine. The block engine is something that we operate. It's a closed source service, pretty similar to, if you guys are familiar with Flashbots and like proposer builder separation. There's on Ethereum network currently around like 90% of the network runs the software called PBS, stands for proposer builder separation, where you have these like block builders that are essentially running code to build blocks on the Ethereum network. Our block engine is like similar-ish to that. There's some differences. I don't think they matter enough to get on this call, to go over on this call. Essentially, the goal of the block engine is to connect validators and searchers and maximize the tips for validators for like a set of searcher bundles. So essentially, the block engine, or the relayer, will forward packets to the block engine. The block engine, every searcher has their own subscription of what they're interested in. So, you know, some searchers, they only run liquidations. So they're only subscribing to protocols that have liquidations. Some are just running arbitrage. So maybe they subscribe to like all the DEXs and AMMs and things like that. And essentially a block engine will like filter that out, make sure that those packets are routed to the right place. Searchers can submit bundles back to the block engine. We actually have a custom fork of the Validator client that we run a gRPC plugin in. It's not Geyser, but it has access to like bank forks and proof of history and all that. So we have a pretty good understanding of like what's going on with the network, and run like pretty custom simulation code in there. So we can, for searchers on the call are interested, one instance is like current simulate transaction will simulate on the previous frozen block, but inside the validator you actually have like the block that's currently being replayed. So we simulate on top of that instead of the last one. We have shred stream running. Basically every validator that runs Jito-Solana is recommended to send us shreds so we get access to the newest data as fast as possible. And yeah, so all the RPC servers in there as well. And then let's see. Yeah, it's globally distributed set of servers operated by us. We have Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Tokyo, New York. And then, yeah, it's relatively easy to spin up new ones. Given the cost requirements for running an RPC, we're currently at 4, but we can spin up new ones pretty fast. And then, yeah, we're currently like adding new features to it. One we added recently was you can actually share bundles and packets across region. So essentially this lets, like if you're a searcher, if you're like a trader in Amsterdam, you can receive packets from the Frankfurt block engine, and you can be like still pretty competitive with the MEV happening on there. Cool. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. Feel free to leave them in the chat, and Brian or myself can answer. So I guess, how do you actually get started running it? Takes less than like 5 or 10 minutes. Code's open source. There's no like contracts or pre-authorization needed for running the validator. Essentially what happens is there's authentication on the block engine side and the relayer side for connecting to them. But essentially we can look at the leader schedule and do kind of this challenge response thing where essentially we authenticate the validators on the leader schedule. So we're only letting people on the leader schedule connect to receive bundles. Yeah, it takes less than 5 or 10 minutes. You basically, we don't have any pre-built binaries yet, but it's pretty easy if you're familiar with Git and the command line. You can basically clone our repo, make sure you're checked out on the right version, run cargo install all or cargo b release, and it will build it roughly at the same time as the Solana Labs validators. We're pretty active in Discord. We have our own Discord as well. So if you have any Jito specific questions, feel free to stop by there. We're happy to help. And then there's also 175 validators that are in the Discord. Well, not all of them are in the Discord, but there's a lot of validators that can help you guys get set up. We have a setup guide, Git book. And yeah, as I mentioned, like software must be built from source. Don't have a built release yet. And the only other thing would be there's a few new parameters on the command line. It's like if you are running a validator, you want to specify the relayer to connect to that's closest to you, block engine that's closest to you. All of these URLs are available on our website. You can set the like commission for your MEV, and there's a few other parameters as well. But it's pretty easy to switch over. Cool. And then yeah, I'll share this doc with Tim afterwards. But we have a Git book, and then Jito website and Discord and all that. So yeah, I'll let how many times do new releases run behind the Solana binaries? We typically try to get them out pretty fast, within a few days, I would say. There's definitely been a few times that we've slipped, where it's more than like 3 or 4 days, but we typically try to get them out within a few days. And certainly if there's like a delegation, try to be compatible with the delegation program minimum requirement as well. Cool. So that's all I have today. Is there any technical or any other questions related to Jito-Solana or MEV or the relayer or anything Solana validator related? Cool. I guess Zentetsu, you wanted to go?
Just curious what your thoughts are on, any changes that the Solana-based protocol may make to transaction fees, priority fees, and how you see that impacting Jito as a, concept. Is it always going to be applicable, even if there are changes to how the base fee mechanism works to allow some aspects of these things to be handled by the base protocol? Or do you think that there could eventually become a time when the base protocol kind of does everything needed?
I think that like deterministic, I think like unless the protocol adds bundles, which I haven't heard of anything yet, I think a lot like most of this for like this deterministic ordering of multiple transactions is like super valuable. And I think it's somewhat separate from the base and like priority fees that are happening on the network. I guess like maybe one impact would be like could certainly like change our calculations on the back end, where we are, you know, have to account if there's dynamic base fees and like priority fees, then it might change the calculation on the back end for like how much does this validator make. But other than that, I don't think it's separate. Max, gonna ask your question?
Yeah, hey Lucas, thanks for the presentation, really thorough. I'm just curious, what's your business model either now or in the future? Are you going to take fees on the relayer? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Right now we take 5% of MEV tips. So every time there's a on a validator's like first leader slot, they will essentially rotate the tips out. And as a part of that, the block builder sets a fee. We're currently the only block builder, so we take 5% fee. And yeah, I mean, that's the current business model. Obviously, the MEV isn't super high right now, so we're not like making a killing. So still trying to figure out other like business models that are appropriate, but not too extractive.
Yeah, I got you. If I can follow up real quick, have you run any kind of numbers on as DeFi activity increases, as trading increases, as you know, volume increases, what will the increased APY look like for MEV?
We have. It's been a while since I looked at that. I think what we found is like with the current volume compared to Ethereum, I guess one way of thinking about the MEV fees as a validator is like a function of DeFi volume. And you know, Ethereum is definitely a very mature MEV ecosystem with PBS. But there's a lot of inefficiencies in the protocols, you know, like the XY equals K curve. They don't have order books, so it's not as efficient. So I think if you look at the MEV, dollar of MEV per dollar of volume on Ethereum, I think Solana would be slightly lower. But as far as like the ratio, I can't remember that off the top of my head.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, Tim.
This might be a little too early, but I'm wondering if you've thought at all about Jito on Firedancer. What's like the plan there, if you've looked into it much?
Yeah. We've definitely talked a lot about it internally. I think you probably know better about the progress there. It looks like they are Firedancer is like almost ready or maybe ready now. Don't quote me on that. If any like news articles are listening or anything. That's just from like skimming through the GitHub repo. It looks like, you know, they're getting close. So I think it depends, you know, what are people's appetite for rolling it out on the network. As I think, you know, everything comes down to incentives and economics. So like, is there enough incentive for validators to run Firedancer, or are validators going to wait for Firedancer? I think in the case of Firedancer, we could probably get that running pretty fast as far as Firedancer goes. That will definitely be way more involved as they are going pretty crazy with the C code. So definitely would like to add bundles in there. I think it just depends on like how they're doing on progress.
Yeah, it makes sense.
There's a question on how much time does it take to receive delegation from Jito. If you can stop our Discord and ask, that would be good. Can coordinate there. And then yeah, the Jito stake pool stakes to validators running the Jito-Solana client. So, and then there's a minimum version requirement as well. Cool. Max.
Yeah, just on the stake pool, are you just delegating all the stake in there evenly to every validator as long as they are running the right version, or are you doing any performance monitoring or anything like that?
Right now it's all equal. There's, if you guys go on Solana Compass, there's a stake pool dashboard, and then you can click on the Jito stake pool, and all of the delegations are currently equal. We are working on some like interesting performance stuff. And I don't want to say too much, but essentially moving performance monitoring on chain for every validator. So we've been running this for around 15 epochs, and we can see a lot of detailed performance metrics around validators on chain. And from there, you can potentially handle stake pool delegation and all the algorithmic stuff on chain. But should have more to share on that soon.
And I guess just to be clear to your question, Max, and for anyone listening, just because a validator runs Jito-Solana does not mean they will get a delegation from the Jito-sol stake pool. And so there's, right now around 175 validators running Jito-Solana. There's around 50, 55 validators in the Jito-sol stake pool delegation. Each of those have about 45,000 SOL. And the reason for that is that Jito-sol is really designed to promote the best interest of the network as well as stakers. And so, for instance, there's no super minority validators in the Jito-sol pool. I'm sure a few of you on this call are frustrated by that, but I mean, it's really, helping to promote the decentralization of the network. And then also, validators that have either poor performance from a delinquency or other perspective, or a commission that is on the high end, then those also are typically the bar for them to get included in the stake pool is quite high, just because, again, it's meant to be a curated group of the best validators on a performance and decentralization perspective for the network. And so I think, most of the validators on this call probably, are very involved and high performing, but just want to level set expectations that if you switch over to Jito-Solana, you will not get an automatic delegation of stake from the stake pool. But you will certainly be considered, and if you're high performing, then you will. Then your odds are strong of getting that over time.
Got you. Thanks.
Yeah, Zentetsu wrote about the not including the super minority piece. Definitely happy to talk about that, because it's definitely something we talk about a lot internally as well.
Yeah, I mean,
everyone has a different opinion on it.
Yeah, I don't want to get to that, but obviously it's your decision, it's your pool. You can decide how it best serves your interest. But not incentivizing people that you need stake, right? Like you need stake to make you need stake behind what your validator is running. So you should be encouraging all the stake that could potentially be running your validator. But the question of whether or not you really need to is different. Like you may be very savvily deciding the best way to distribute your stake so that it has the greatest impact on increasing usage of your pool of your validator software. And quite frankly, I'm probably going to use it either way. So from your perspective, you probably don't need to stake me. So yeah, but I don't like the idea of phrasing it in terms of like the best interest of the network. It's really the best interest of Jito, and their use of their stake. So sorry.
Looks like we've run out of questions. So I want to say thank you to Lucas and the Jito team. Especially a big thank you from me because they put this together on short notice. So appreciate the effort, and thank you all. This is probably the last educational workshop for the year. We might do one more in November-ish timeframe, but I will let you know at the when it gets closer to that time. But yeah, thanks everybody, and I'll see you soon.